My name is Lila Bennett, and I'm 24 now. But this story feels like it belongs to someone older, someone who's carried too much weight for too few years. New York City is my backdrop, a sprawl of steel and stories, where dreams collide like taxis in rush hour, and heartbreak hides in the steam rising from manhole covers. I'm a barista by day, aspiring writer by night, with freckles across my nose that make me look even younger than I am, and curly auburn hair. I tie back to keep the chaos at bay, but beneath the apron and the half-finished manuscripts, there's a scar that time hasn't faded, a love that bloomed too late for him, too soon for me to forget. This is our broken melody, a tale of stolen moments between a girl of 22 and a man of 58, a romance that whispered promises it couldn't keep, and the silence that followed when his body betrayed us both. It's raw, it's real, every ache etched from the journals I kept. If this tugs at the hollow in your chest, leave a note below. Where are you from? Sometimes sharing the city lights the dark a little. It started 2 summers ago, in the humid haze of a Greenwich Village coffee shop called The Daily Grind. I was 22, straight out of NYU's creative writing program, slinging lattes to pay off student loans while scribbling short stories on napkins during slow shifts. New York was supposed to be my launch pad, endless sidewalks to wander, subways to muse in, but mostly it was blisters from 2. Many shifts and rejections from Lit. Mags that said my voice was too green. That's when Edward Eddie Harlan became my regular. He was 56 then, a retired architect with silver threading his dark, hair and laugh lines that mapped a life of blueprints and boardrooms. Eddie had designed half the lofts in Soho, but after his wife's passing 5 years prior, he'd traded drafting tables for freelance, consulting, and long afternoons lost in books. He'd shuffle in around 3 p.m., order a black coffee, no foam, no fuss, and settle at the corner table with a worn copy of The Great Gatsby, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. "Make it strong, kiddo," he'd say with a wink that crinkled his eyes, voice gravelly from years of site meetings in the wind-whipped canyons of Midtown. I noticed him because he tipped like he was tipping the scales of fate, always a 20 on a $5 tab, slipped with a quiet for the dreams you're chasing. One rainy Tuesday, no. Wait, one sweltering Tuesday, the AC busted and the air thick as regret, I finally sat with him during my break. "What's a guy like you reading about lost love?" I teased, sliding into the chair opposite, my iced tea sweating rings on the wood. He looked up, surprised but pleased, like I'd handed him a forgotten sketch. "Reminds me of what I almost had right," he replied, his Boston accent softened by decades in the city. "Name's Eddie, and you? The one pouring magic into these mugs?" "Lila." We talked for 45 minutes that day about Fitzgerald's green light as a metaphor for unattainable youth, how my stories always ended in goodbyes because I feared the middles. He shared snippets, 30 years married to Claire, who died of breast cancer at 52, leaving him with blueprints of houses they'd never built and a daughter, Becca, now 28 and thriving in Seattle as a tech whiz. "Life's a structure, Lila," he said, tracing the rim of his mug. "You build it steady, but sometimes the foundation cracks." I laughed, called him dramatic for an architect, but his eyes held mine a beat too long, and when he left, he slid a business card across the table, not for work, but scribbled with his number, in case you need a reader for those stories. Texts turned to calls to coffee outside the shop. By fall, we were walking Washington Square Park. My arm looped through his as leaves crunched underfoot. He was old enough to be my dad. Hell, Becca was my age, but age blurred in the way he'd listen. Really listened like my half-baked plots were cathedrals. "You're a force, kid," he'd say, squeezing my hand. "Don't let this city dim you." Our first kiss happened on a ferry to Staten Island, the skyline shrinking behind us, his lips tentative against mine, tasting of salt air and hesitation. "This is crazy," I whispered. "Beautifully so," he murmured back. We didn't label it, too fragile for boxes, but it felt like home. Winter wrapped us in its chill, but we built warmth in stolen pockets. Eddie had a brownstone in the West Village, all exposed brick and shelves groaning with first editions. A space that smelled of aged paper and his sandalwood aftershave. I'd crash there after closing shifts, curled against him on the leather couch, his arm a steady anchor as we watched old Bogart films. He taught me to appreciate the bones of the city, the way the Brooklyn Bridge's cables sang in the wind, the hidden speakeasies he'd designed in the 90s. In return, I dragged him to open mics in the East Village, where I'd read pieces about a girl chasing shadows, and he'd clap loudest, eyes shining like I'd hung the moon. The age gap whispered doubts, but we drowned them in laughter. Becca visited for Thanksgiving, eyeing me over turkey with a mix of protectiveness and curiosity. "Dad's smitten," she confided later while he carved the bird. "Just be gentle. He's been alone too long." I nodded, heart swelling. Holidays blurred, Hanukkah lights in his window, my family's Christmas cards forwarded from Ohio, where Mom still sent care packages of homemade fudge. Eddie met them via Zoom, charmed Mom with tales of designing eco-homes, promised Dad he'd look out for their wild one. Intimacy unfolded slow, respectful. Our first night together was in his bed, sheets crisp as fresh vellum, his hands tracing my skin like he was memorizing elevations. "You're a wonder, Lila," he breathed, and I felt seen, not as a young barista, but as the woman emerging. We talked futures and hypotheticals, me finishing my novel, him consulting part-time while we traveled, maybe a cabin in the Adirondacks, sketching ideas over coffee. "Build with me?" he'd ask, fingers laced in mine. Always yes, but cracks etched in spring. Eddie tired easier, brushed it off his old bones, and skipped. Our walks for afternoon naps. A doctor's visit he downplayed, routine checkup, nothing more. I believed him because love does that, wraps blinders in silk. By summer, at 57, he proposed on the High Line, amid wildflowers pushing through concrete, a vintage ring from Claire's collection resized for my finger, sapphire, simple, eternal. "Marry me, not despite the years, but because of them," he said, kneeling stiffly, voice thick. Tears blurred the Hudson. I said yes, envisioning a quiet ceremony in City Hall, then a life layered like his blueprints, mine on his. Wedding plans hummed low-key, Becca as witness, a justice of the peace with a view of the Flatirons. No, wait, the Flatbush Avenue clock tower. I cut shifts to 4 days, poured savings into a dress from a Brooklyn thrift, lace over silk, vintage vibe. Eddie glowed, but shadows lingered. One night in July, mid-rehearsal dinner prep at his place, he clutched his chest over the stove, face ashen as linguine boiled over. "Just indigestion," he gasped, waving me off. Paramedics came anyway, insisted by a neighbor who'd heard the thud. ER at Mount Sinai, stress test, EKGs, the works. Diagnosis landed like a demolition ball, congestive heart failure, early stage, from years of ignored hypertension and a valve weakened by age. Manageable with meds, lifestyle, the cardiologist assured, a brisk woman in her 40s, but no more marathons. Eddie, he joked through it, "Guess I'll stick to sketching," but I saw the fear in his eyes that night, holding me too tight. "Don't want to leave you with half a life?" "Kiddo, then don't," I whispered fierce. We adjusted. Low sodium meals I learned from YouTube, walks shortened to blocks, his consulting gigs shelved. The wedding went on, intimate and imperfect. City Hall, Becca teary, a picnic in Bryant Park with prosciutto skipped for fruit. Vows exchanged under a magnolia. I promised to build with you, through every revision. Rings on, his gold band loose. Now, and we honeymoon local, a weekend at a Catskills B&B, fireflies are confetti, back in the city, reality rebarred. Eddie's energy ebbed. He'd nap while I wrote, wake groggy. "You're young, Lila, vibrant, it's a drag." I'd shush him, brew his decaf, remind him love wasn't a ledger. Fall brought Becca's wedding, irony sharp in Seattle. Eddie insisted on going, popped beta blockers like candy. The flight drained him. At the rehearsal, he swayed, excused himself early. I found him later in the hotel garden, pale against the roses. "Proud of her?" he murmured, but his hand trembled in mine. Ceremony day. He walked Becca down the aisle, steady on my arm, but collapsed post-toast, paramedics again, this time en route to Virginia Mason, minor episode. They said, dehydration, meds, but the seed planted, time's thief circling. Back in New York by winter, Eddie's world shrank. Mornings started with pill sorters, evenings with oxygen canisters on standby, prescribed, just in case. I quit the coffee shop cold, took freelance editing gigs from home, my laptop balanced on his drafting table. "You're sacrificing," he'd protest, voice wheezy. For us frayed at edges, arguments sparked over smalls. His refusal to see a specialist sooner, my hovering like a scaffold. "I was fine before you, Lila. Don't make me your project." Words stung. I'd storm to the fire escape, city hum mocking our quiet cage. Becca called daily, guilt lacing her updates. He's stubborn, like Mom. Holidays hollowed, Thanksgiving takeout, Hanukkah candles unlit. My novel stalled, chapters deleted in fits of doubt. What if I'm the crack? I'd journal, ink blurring. Eddie softened in apologies, pulling me close. You're my masterpiece, kid. This body's just faulty wiring. Lovemaking shifted tender, urgent, his hands slower, mine reverent. But nights I'd wake to his labored breaths, fear a third wheel in our bed. Spring unearthed the abyss. Routine echo at NYU Langone, valve failing faster. Ejection fraction dipping to 25%. Transplant list, the doc urged, paperwork a mountain. Eddie balked. Lottery odds, Lila, and at my age, we fought, me pleading, him resolute. Don't want borrowed time if it means more pain. Becca flew in, mediated tearful truces. Summers passed in fragments, park benches where he'd sketch weakened lines. My stories read aloud to his fading focus. By fall at 58, mobility betrayed. Kane first, then Walker, brownstone stairs a nemesis. I hired a homemade Maria, mornings only. Afternoons hours, though hours meant audiobooks and crosswords. Remember our fairy kiss? He'd reminisce, eyes distant. I'd nod, throat tight, tracing his knuckles veined like old maps. Becca's pregnancy news, grandbaby en route, lit him briefly. Got a stick for that. But scan soured, fluid buildup, hospitalizations blurring, 3 and 2 months IVs and isolation gowns. Thanksgiving loomed. Becca due in January. Eddie rallied for a family trip. Upstate to a cabin he'd designed decades back. Accessible ramps retrofitted. Drive north tested, stops every hour, his color gray as November skies. Cabin arrival, wood smoke and whispers, Maria trailing with meds. Evenings by the hearth, he'd share war stories. Claire's laugh echoing in his drafts. How grief hollowed him till I filled the frame. You gave me a sequel, Lila, worth every blueprint. But night 2, crisis crested. Chess sees mid-dinner, turkey untouched. Ambulance wail through pines. Regional ER stabilized, but transferred to Westchester Medical End Stage, they termed it. Palliative now, the team counseled, words like wrecking balls. Becca arrived frantic, ultrasound in tow. I held Eddie's hand, his grip frail. Forgive me, kiddo, he rasped, machines beeping dirge. For the half-built. Whole enough, I lied, kissing his forehead, salt of tears mingling. Hospice followed, home. His brownstone, a sanctuary of beeps and bassinets prepped for the unseen grand. Days dissolved, morphine drips, my readings of Gatsby aloud, Becca nesting nearby. He slipped in lucidity, Mary young, Lila build fresh foundations. I'd nod, pen his fragments for my book. Becca labored early, girl, Elise, tiny fists in the waiting room. Eddie held her once, whisper soft, my legacy. Eyes met mine, gratitude, goodbye. Dawn of winter solstice, he faded. I at his side, Becca across, Maria prayers in Spanish. Last breath ragged, hand slack in mine. Love you, kid, final murmur. Room stilled, world cracked. Funeral sparse, Riverside Chapel. Blueprints folded into his casket, our sketches mingled. Becca clung. I eulogized, voice splintering. Eddie built worlds, but loved like poetry, fierce, fleeting, condolences blurred. Too young for this. Night's post, brownstone echoey, his chair a ghost. I packed slow, journals to keep, suits to donate. Becca offered stay. I declined, needed the grind. Grief's geometry, angles sharp. Barista gig reclaimed, lattes a ritual. Novel resurrected, borrowed heart, chapters woven from us. Rejection softened to agents. Voice rings true. Becca's visits anchored, Elise's coups a bridge. Dates, distant specters. Trust timbered tentative. Spring bloomed Becca's invite. Seattle move-in, help with baby. He'd want you near. I weighed New York roots versus family graft. Sold the brownstone. Proceed seeding a fresh start. Rainier Valley rental. Adjunct teaching gig at a community college. Words flowed freer. Workshops on fractured narratives. My scar a syllabus. Twist tendril. Manuscript sale mid 5 figures. Borrowed heart hit shelves fall after. Reviews raw. A requiem for unequal eternities. Book tour. Village readings. Eddie's ghost in the Q&A. Becca beamed, Elise toddling at launches. 24 now, Seattle's evergreens my skyline, Elise's laughter my revision. Adjunct life layers, students' stories mirroring mine, words as weld. Becca's partner Tom folds me in, family forged. Eddie's ring, Warren Daily, sapphire steady. New York fades to fawn fracture. Love's lesson, build anyway even if the span sags. Crazy, beautifully so. This ache yours too? Comment your corner, Boston, Berlin? Like if time's thieved your blueprint, sub for more mended melodies. Thanks for holding the frame.